The great hall of the Galactic Council shimmered with energy as hundreds of alien species gathered beneath glowing banners that floated above them like living cloth. The room was enormous, walls of glass showing stars beyond, voices humming, in a dozen languages and delegates draped in robes, scales, armor, or fur. At the center stood Chancellor Ilari, a tall, graceful figure with sapphire feathers and wise, silver eyes. She raised her hand and slowly the noise faded. She spoke in the universal tongue, her voice soft but sharp enough to silence even the noisiest corners of the hall. "Let it be known," she said clearly, "humanity is not to be provoked." Her words floated in the air like frost, but instead of fear or agreement, a wave of amusement rolled through the chamber. Whispers, snickers, even laughter echoed from various corners. One voice, loud and sneering, stood out among the crowd. "They are primitives," barked General Vakul of the Kothrax Empire, a towering reptilian warrior whose armor bore the blood-red crest of conquest. "They barely reached interstellar flight. What threat could they pose to us?" Several others chuckled or nodded, feeding off his bravado. The Chancellor's feathers dimmed to a warning gray as she slowly turned to face the general. "You laugh," she said quietly, "as others before you did. The Rukan Armada, the Shatar Hive, the Clivex Swarm. All great, all ancient, all gone." A quiet fell over the hall, uneasy now, like a shadow had passed. Ilari lifted a slender hand, and holograms shimmered into view, flashes of history, a Rukan capital ship torn in two, Shatar nests reduced to ash, Clivex warriors overrun and broken, not by numbers, not by brute strength, but by something fiercer, something human. "They fought the humans?" someone whispered. "And lost?" The Chancellor nodded once. "Not only lost, they were erased." The Kothrax general stepped forward again undeterred. "My empire has stood for 9,000 years. Our weapons crack moons. Our fleets blot out stars. What can these humans do that others could not?" Ilari stared at him for a long moment, then deactivated the holograms. "You may find out. They don't boast. They don't warn. They simply respond." She stepped down, her role finished. The council began to stir again, but the air had changed. Doubt crept into the cracks of arrogance. Fear hid in the corners of pride. Yet despite the evidence, despite the caution, the Kothrax Empire had already made its choice. War had been declared. Earth had received the message. Most expected panic, withdrawal, bargaining. But the humans didn't plead, didn't explain, didn't even blink. They sent only a short message back, 3 words that chilled even the most hardened diplomats. "Understood. We'll handle it." There was no anger in the reply. No fire. Just quiet confidence. The kind that came not from strength, but from experience, from surviving. The kind of reply that made veteran warriors shift in their seats. Somewhere deep in the void, the Kothrax warfleet moved toward Sol. Black ships like floating fortresses, engines glowing with deadly energy. They carried weapons meant to tear apart planets, and warriors bred for endless war. But Earth didn't shiver. Earth didn't run. In the silence that followed the transmission, the galaxy remembered the stories it had tried to forget. And somewhere within that silence, a single truth began to take shape again. A truth long buried by arrogance and time. Humanity wasn't like the rest. They were something different, and now the galaxy would be reminded why. The Kothrax fleet moved through the stars like a dark tide, its countless warships cutting across space toward the Sol system, engines rumbling with the power of ancient destruction. On board the lead dreadnought Bloodwing, General Vakul stood, at the command deck, arms crossed, fangs bared in a grin of confidence. Around him, screens showed real-time updates of their approach to Earth. Every system was prepared, every weapon primed. The humans, he believed, wouldn't stand a chance. Their planet had few defenses compared to the Kothrax, and though Earth had entered the galactic stage only a few decades ago, they were still seen as young and careless. What Vakul didn't understand was that humans had grown not by safety, but by surviving the harshest of struggles. Back on Earth, deep inside the underground command center known as Fort Skyreach, alarms flashed red as the approach of the Kothrax fleet was confirmed. Inside the steel walls, surrounded by screens, radios, and humming equipment, stood Commander Arya Holt. She was tall and lean, with sharp eyes that seemed to cut through panic. Around her, officers moved quickly, updating data, sending encrypted signals, preparing defensive systems. Arya didn't shout, she never had to. Her calm voice carried weight, and her reputation stretched across the Terran Defense Forces. She was known not for her rank, but for what she'd survived. The Battle of Europa, the Sarn Rebellion, the Xylon Breach. Every time others fell, she rose. And now, with the Kothrax approaching, her experience would be tested once more. "Any updates from the colonies?" she asked quietly. A young officer replied, "Mars and Titan are in blackout. They've sealed off and are armed. Civilian evacuation on Earth is 73% complete. Everyone else is underground." Arya nodded. "Initiate mirror protocol." Those words turned every head. Mirror protocol was not standard defense. It was something else, something old. A series of hidden weapons and traps built in secret, far from galactic eyes, designed not to protect Earth, but to punish anyone who attacked it. Far above Earth's orbit, hidden satellites powered up. Cloaked ships blinked to life and deep ocean launch tubes shifted. For centuries, humans had feared being alone in the galaxy. Now that they weren't, they had prepared for the worst. And now, the worst had come. As the Kothrax fleet neared Pluto's orbit, a sudden pulse of light hit their sensors. Their communications jammed, their radars scrambled, and entire scout units vanished into silence. "On board the Bloodwing," Vakul growled, slamming a clawed fist into the nearest console. "What trick is this?" But it wasn't a trick, it was strategy. The humans knew they couldn't match the Kothrax in size, but that didn't matter. They fought smarter. Strike ships hidden in asteroid belts launched precision missiles, cutting out engines of incoming ships. Swarms of drones flooded from Jupiter's moon bases, overwhelming targeting systems. Laser webs flickered to life between satellites, slicing through the edges of the massive fleet. And then the message came again. This time it played across every Kothrax ship. A human face, Commander Arya, speaking with calm, cold fire. "You were warned," she said. "You thought we were weak. You were wrong." The transmission ended, and the real battle began. Explosions lit up the blackness of space. Massive carriers cracked under invisible torpedoes. EMP bursts turned, weapon systems dark. Kothrax fighters screamed as their ships lost control, crashing into their own allies. But humans lost lives too. Several drone fleets were wiped out and defense satellites blinked into flame. Yet they kept fighting, not like an empire, but like a species that refused to die. Every loss made them angrier, sharper, more relentless. And in every ship, every soldier, burned the same message. We are not like you. We are different. Back on Earth, Arya watched as enemy numbers fell. Her heart ached for every life lost, but she didn't flinch. This was survival. This was what humans did best. They adapted. They endured. They made their enemies regret ever thinking they were prey. And the Kothrax, once so sure of their victory, now began to understand that this war was not going to be easy. They had stepped into fire and humanity was just getting started. The war spread like wildfire through the stars, and what had begun as a bold Kothrax invasion turned into a brutal, grinding battle across space and colonies. Earth's defenders, though smaller in number, fought with precision, grit, and something the Kothrax had never truly understood: heart. Commander Arya Holt had pushed Earth's defense line to its limit, coordinating fleets from Mars, Titan, and the deep space base on Europa. Even the mining stations on the edge of the asteroid belt had been armed and activated, sending automated cannons and drone clouds into the fray. But Earth wasn't just fighting from the skies. Underground, deep in the Rocky Mountains, a new kind of team was being prepared, one not made up of soldiers alone but of specialists, thinkers, and survivors. Among them was Elias Ward, a cybernetics engineer and former field scout, a man who once survived an entire winter alone on Europa, with nothing but a damaged suit and a broken transmitter. His calm mind and unmatched understanding of alien tech had made him the backbone of Earth's adaptation programs. And now, he was being called back into action. "We're sending you to the Arc-class dreadnought Helios," Arya told him during a private briefing. "You'll be part of Strike Team Echo. We believe there's a Kothrax virus rewriting our satellite codes. You need to get up there, disable the virus, and reboot the uplinks before we go blind." Elias didn't hesitate. He nodded once, stood, and left to join the team. A few hours later, the Helios launched. It was one of Earth's largest warships, built in orbit and shielded with tech reverse-engineered from a dozen alien sources. It held over 2,000 crew members and enough firepower to level a moon. But even so, it was a single target against an ocean of Kothrax warships. Inside, Strike Team Echo moved like shadows. 8 members, each trained to handle infiltration, sabotage, and high-risk systems recovery. As the ship jumped into combat space near Neptune, the stars around them seemed to flicker with fire. The Helios dove straight into the edge of the battle, surrounded by friendly and enemy ships alike. Explosions lit up the void, and the entire hull of the ship shuddered as shockwaves rolled through it. But Elias had no time to think about that. He and the team moved through narrow passages, deeper into the tech core of the ship, where the central relay tower for the satellite grid was stored. Along the way, they passed soldiers tending to the wounded, engineers screaming into radios, and gunners manning silent cannons. The weight of the war was on everyone's face, but no one gave up. No one asked to be spared. When they reached the core, the door had already been melted open by plasma fire. Inside, Kothrax infiltration bots, small, fast, spider-like machines, had torn through cables and left glowing data ports covered in living code. "It's rewriting the entire network," Elias whispered, eyes wide. "They're trying to turn our satellites against us." He dropped to his knees, opened his case, and began typing furiously. Sparks flew from the consoles as he bypassed systems, redirected power, and locked out the Kothrax code. The bots noticed. 2 turned, eyes glowing red, and leaped. But Echo, team was ready. Lasers flared, bullets sliced through airless space, and in seconds the bots were smoking wrecks. Still, Elias kept working, sweat beading on his brow. "We need 10 more seconds," he called. "Just hold them." More bots came. The walls cracked from the pressure. One soldier screamed as a bot tore into his armor, but another teammate pulled him back and shot the creature point blank. Elias's hands moved like lightning. He isolated the virus, froze the core, and slammed in a manual override key. With a final spark and a deep hum, the satellite grid rebooted. Earth was no longer blind. The humans now had full battlefield vision, and with that, everything changed. Arya's forces immediately adapted, flanking the Kothrax and striking from hidden positions with terrifying accuracy. The tide shifted. The Kothrax were still strong, still terrifying, but their edge was gone. And all because a small group of humans had refused to let fear stop them. As the Helios turned and pulled away from the front, Elias sat back, heart pounding, staring at the screen that now showed clean, blue-linked networks. He didn't smile. He just nodded once. Knowing what they had just done might have saved the entire planet. But he also knew this was only the beginning. The real war was just starting, and humanity was far from finished. Above the burning rings of Saturn, the war shifted from space to something even more dangerous: mind and morale. The Kothrax, shocked by their growing losses, unleashed a new weapon: psychic warfare. Not just missiles or machines, but signals that twisted thoughts, sparked nightmares, and turned fear into a weapon. Across human fleets, some soldiers froze in panic while others collapsed, overwhelmed by hallucinations or voices whispering doom in their heads. Command systems flickered as crew members hesitated, unsure of what was real. But Earth had seen madness before, in war, in isolation, in deep space. And the answer to this new threat didn't come from a general or a gun, but from someone many. Thought was long gone. Dr. Tessa Quill, a neuroscientist turned recluse, once head of the Terran Mind Defense Program. Years ago, she had warned that alien psychic tech was not only possible but likely. She was laughed out of her post, her funding cut, her research shelved. Yet she kept working in silence, off the books, studying brainwaves, building neural shields, and crafting something she called the Echo Mind. Now, as the psychic waves spread chaos through human ships, her research became Earth's only hope. A signal from Arya Holt's command reached her bunker hidden under the South Pole. "We need the Echo Mind uploaded to fleet comms, now." Tessa didn't ask questions. She didn't ask for credit. She just activated her system, linked her prototype uplink tower to the EarthNet satellites, and initiated a full broadcast. Across the fleet, tiny implants in helmets, command chairs, and crew pods activated. For many, it felt like a cool wind blowing away the smoke in their minds. The voices stopped. The panic faded. Clear thought returned. Ships stabilized. Orders flowed again. But the damage had already been done. One of Earth's main command cruisers, the Vigilant Sky, had gone dark, lost somewhere near Saturn's icy rings. It carried over 500 lives and held a data core that stored strategic intel for Earth's entire outer colony network. If the Kothrax boarded it and extracted the core, it would mean disaster. So Arya made the call. Recover or destroy it, no matter the cost. And the only team suited for a mission that dangerous was Strike Team Echo. Elias Ward, now a key figure on Helios, rejoined the team, their numbers reduced but their resolve unbroken. They launched in a stealth pod, silent and cloaked, weaving through debris and dead ships. The Vigilant Sky floated eerily, its lights dim, its hull scarred and broken in places. Inside was worse. Silence reigned, broken only by the echo of boots and the hum of leaking air. The team moved fast, checking for survivors. They found a few, scared, disoriented, but alive. Some were curled in corners, whispering to things no one else could see. The psychic attack had struck this ship hard, but the core was intact, guarded. As the team approached the main server room, the walls rippled. Literally. A Kothrax commander had nested inside the ship and was using living tech to reshape its corridors, turning it into a trap. It wasn't just a creature, it was a psychic weapon in flesh. The fight that followed was unlike anything they had faced. The creature could bend light, twist sound, and strike directly at the mind. One team member collapsed, eyes wide in terror, screaming at things only he could see. Another turned his gun on his friend before Elias tackled him and shut down his Pfizer's feed. Tessa's Echo Mind tech helped, but only so much against something this strong. In the chaos, Elias remembered something Tessa once said in a briefing. Even the strongest signal needs a grounding point. Remove its focus, and the illusion breaks. So he ran straight at the core of the creature, dodging tendrils and fire, and slammed a pulse grenade against its spine. The blast didn't kill it, but it broke its focus. Suddenly the illusions vanished, and the rest of the team saw it clearly. They opened fire. In a storm of bullets, lasers, and smoke, the beast fell. The moment it died, the ship felt real again. Lights flickered on. The survivors stopped whispering. The team reached the core, downloaded and encrypted the data, and planted a timed overload just in case. They evacuated just as the Vigilant Sky lit up behind them, a burst of flame sealing the threat forever. When they returned to Helios, battered, but alive, Elias and the team didn't say much. They didn't have to. They knew what they had just done had saved millions. And far away, in the depths of space, the Kothrax began to whisper for the first time, not about conquest, but about fear. Because they were learning what the galaxy had forgotten, humanity is different. They don't break the same way. Above the wreckage of Jupiter's shattered moons, the war entered a new stage. No longer about battleships and psychic weapons alone, but about survival, unity, and something the Kothrax never understood: human grit. As the Terran fleet regrouped, at the Helios defense ring, new reports poured in from fringe colonies. Entire systems going silent, outposts left empty, and strange patterns in the void. The Kothrax weren't just attacking, they were learning, adapting, reshaping their invasion. With terrifying precision, they began to move like shadows through space, striking communication hubs, supply routes, and rescue lines with perfect timing, almost as if they knew where humans would be before they even moved. That's when Arya Holt and Elias Ward realized. The truth, there was a traitor. Somewhere high up in the Terran command chain, someone was feeding intel to the Kothrax. Not through tech or broken codes, but something worse. Direct psychic contact. Somehow the enemy had turned a human mind into a living beacon. The hunt began in silence. No broadcast, no accusations, only trusted minds and silent scans. They brought in Tessa Quill again, not for her machines this time, but for her instincts. She interviewed officers face to face, watched for microsignals, changes in pulse and expression. Slowly, patterns formed. Then she found it. General Rin Voss, a decorated war hero and survivor of the first contact skirmishes. His brain showed traces of low-frequency spikes, strange neural echoes not native to any human pattern. He had been captured briefly during an earlier battle and rescued, but no one had realized he was changed. Not brainwashed, not controlled. Worse, convinced. Somehow the Kothrax had shown him a vision of their world, their order, their dream of a galaxy with no war, no pain, just silence and obedience. Rin Voss believed it. He had been passing locations, weak points, fleet timings through encoded thought bursts, hidden in standard communication bursts. When Arya confronted him, he didn't deny it. He simply said, "You'll see. They bring peace." There was no time to argue. The Kothrax were already moving toward the Sol system. Earth itself was the next target. Now that they had mapped every defense line, they were ready for the final blow. Humanity had just one chance: turn the trap around. With Rin Voss's own message codes, they fed false data, made Earth seem weaker, unguarded, a tempting final target. The Kothrax took the bait. Their armada, hundreds of massive living warships, bent space and emerged above Neptune, slicing the sky open with crackling portals. But this time, the Terran fleet was ready. Not in defense, in ambush. Hidden behind Neptune's magnetic field, cloaked among asteroid fields and ice dust, waited Earth's last firestorm. Project Horizon, a network of orbital cannons, EMP mines, and solar-charged railguns powered by the sun itself. As the Kothrax ships pushed forward, they were met with a wall of fire and light. It wasn't just war, it was fury. Ships exploded before they could fire. EMPs tore through nervous systems. Human pilots, fighting in neural-linked squadrons called Ghost Wings, moved like lightning, dodging plasma and firing in perfect arcs. Arya led the command from the dreadnought Aegis Crown, while Elias and Strike Team Echo boarded the largest enemy flagship, hoping to end the war at its heart. Inside that ship, they saw something horrifying: a giant fusion core shaped like a brain, pulsing with psychic energy, surrounded by hundreds of cocooned life forms from other conquered species. All of them linked, drained, controlled. It was the source of the Kothrax's coordination. Destroying it would sever their hive mind, but doing so would mean triggering a reaction that could tear space open. Elias looked at his team, all ready to die, and said just one word: now. They set the charges, fought off waves of twisted alien guardians, and as the core began to shake, they raced to their escape ship. Outside, the human fleet held the line as the psychic web collapsed. Suddenly, Kothrax ships veered off course. They fired in confusion, turned on each other, crashed into debris. The connection had snapped. Without the hive mind, they were just beasts again. The human fleet pressed in with full force, pushing the enemy back for the first time in the war. As the flagship exploded behind them, Elias and his team barely escaped, their ship tumbling into space, battered and burning, but alive. On Earth, people looked up and saw the sky burn not from invasion but from victory. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. And now, across the stars, the warning once whispered in fear became a truth shouted in fire. Humanity is different. They adapt. They endure. They don't just fight to win. They fight for each other. The ruins of the Kothrax flagship still glowed faintly in orbit when the stars began to whisper again. Not in words, but in pulses of fear. Though the psychic core had been destroyed, a final signal had escaped its collapse, streaking into deep space like a dying scream. The human fleet, though victorious, remained on high alert. On the bridge of the Aegis Crown, Arya Holt stood staring into the void, knowing this wasn't over. The Kothrax hive mind was shattered, but something deeper had been stirred. A failsafe, maybe, or a higher force the enemy had never dared to call before. As Earth celebrated, the real storm was on its way. All across colonized space, strange rifts began to appear. These weren't like the Kothrax portals. These rifts bled darkness, bending light and physics alike. Ships sent to investigate vanished or returned twisted. Satellites went blind. Then came the message, not in code, not in words, but a wave of raw feeling that hit every psychic empath and mind-touched human across the galaxy. They fell to their knees as one, gasping, bleeding from the nose and ears, whispering the same phrase. The architects are waking. No one knew who they were. Not even the Kothrax had spoken of them, but ancient ruins on Mars, in the frozen rings of Titan, and in long-dead alien worlds all began to activate at once, glowing with symbols matching the energy signatures of the rifts. Something ancient and enormous was rising. Arya gathered her surviving commanders, including Elias, who had just returned from med suspension after barely surviving the flagship's destruction. Tessa Quill arrived with new data, deep scans of the psychic frequencies. They showed a pattern older than human life, older than Kothrax, something buried deep in the fabric of space itself. The architects weren't invaders. They were the original builders of the galaxy's order. They had designed the very psychic pathways all species now used, including the Kothrax. And now, after being disturbed by the hive mind's destruction, they were returning to restore balance in their own way. That meant wiping the board clean. All life that had evolved, spread, and fought in their absence was now seen as noise. They weren't coming to rule. They were coming to erase. Across the Terran Alliance, panic spread. The Kothrax had been a war. This was something worse. This was judgment. One of the first rifts tore open near Alpha Centauri, and what came through was not a fleet but a shape, massive, geometric, floating through space without engines or lights. A solid black tetrahedron the size of a moon, pulsing with impossible gravity. It simply erased a planet as it passed, folding it out of space without firing a single weapon. No one knew how to stop it. Missiles and energy weapons did nothing. Time itself seemed to bend around it. Ships sent too close aged into rust or were frozen in moments forever. But then, something happened. Humans began to feel it. Not just psychics. Not just the trained minds. Ordinary people. Children, old men, miners, artists. They began dreaming of strange symbols, glowing blue lines in the air, matching the ruins from Mars. Elias saw them too, in every mirror, every reflection. It wasn't fear. It was invitation. The architects weren't ignoring humanity. They had noticed them. Something about the human mind, its chaos, emotion, refusal to break, didn't match the pattern. It confused the signal, delayed the erasure. Arya realized that humanity might be the only species capable of resisting the reordering, not with firepower, but with something even older, free will. So she made a decision. Earth's greatest minds, including Tessa and the mind-touched survivors, gathered at the ruins beneath Olympus Mons. They activated the structure, using the psychic echoes humans had only begun to explore. A final message was sent, not of surrender, not of war, but of defiance. A raw stream of dreams, love, memories, pain, songs, mistakes, and laughter. It wasn't a weapon. It was a story. The story of being human. For the first time in galactic history, the architects paused. The great shape over Alpha Centauri stopped moving. The other rifts froze. The dream had reached them, and the war shifted again, not by strength of arms, but by the strength of identity. Humanity was not just different. They were something new, something the architects had not predicted, and that made them dangerous, or perhaps worth sparing. The stillness after the dream was like the silence before a storm, but it never came. The massive tetrahedron hovering over Alpha Centauri remained frozen in place, pulsing faintly with cold light. Across the galaxy, the rifts began to close, one by one, not with thunder or violence, but with quiet understanding, as if the universe itself was listening to what the humans had shown. On Earth, on Mars, on every colony and station across human space, people waited in fearful silence. And then, something incredible happened. The tetrahedron moved, not to attack, but to lower itself gently toward a dead moon orbiting a gas giant near the Centauri system. It settled there like a monolith, perfectly still. No message came, no signal followed. But every psychic, every mind sensitive, and even those with no special ability, felt something change inside them. A presence once cold and alien had softened. It had listened. It had learned. In the days that followed, humanity was shaken. There had been no final battle, no climactic explosion or last stand. Instead, they had survived by showing something no species had before, who they truly were. Aria Holt stood with Elias and Tessa Quill in the command room of the Aegis Crown, watching as scientists cautiously approached the resting architect construct. It remained silent, its smooth black surface unbroken. But its presence alone had changed the laws of gravity in that region. Plants grown near its influence began to evolve faster. Time bent differently near its edges. It wasn't a weapon. It was a gift, or maybe a challenge. Earth's leaders debated what it meant. Some feared it was a trap, a quiet way to wait and study. Others believed it was a sign of respect, a silent acknowledgement that humanity had proven something the architects couldn't predict: the power of free will, emotion, and chaos. While other species had leaned into order, structure, and logic, humans had embraced failure, creativity, and madness. It made them dangerous, but it also made them beautiful in a way the ancient minds had not expected. Across space, other alien civilizations began to reach out, not in fear but in awe. Species that had ignored or underestimated Earth now looked at humans with new eyes. They had faced the Kothrax and survived. They had faced the oldest power in the galaxy and made it. Pause and whispers spread. The phrase that had once been a warning turned into legend. Aliens were warned. Humanity is different. Elias, scarred but alive, returned to Earth briefly to speak before the Galactic Council. His speech wasn't long. He didn't talk like a hero. He simply said, "We don't know why we're different. We just are. And maybe that's the point." His words echoed far beyond that room. Aria, meanwhile, remained with the fleet, watching the stars, knowing there were still dangers to come. But now the galaxy saw humanity not as a child species, but as something new, something unpredictable. Tessa continued her research, diving deeper into the psychic energy that had saved them all. She found that humans were evolving. The architect's presence had changed something in their minds. New abilities were awakening. Not just telepathy, but shared dreams, emotional resonance, even glimpses into possible futures. Humanity was changing slowly, becoming something more, not because of war, but because they had survived it and chosen to show who they were instead of what they could destroy. The story of Earth spread far and wide. Songs were written in alien tongues about the fire in human hearts. Paintings were made of the final psychic dream, of a little girl's laughter, a mother's grief, a soldier's sacrifice. Across stars and species they remembered, and deep in the shadows of space, the architects watched, not with fear, not with hate, but with curiosity. The board had not been wiped clean, the game had changed. And the peace they had never planned for, the chaotic, passionate, stubborn humans, was now the wild card in the galaxy. Peace, for now, held. But everyone knew it wouldn't last forever. New threats would come. But now, whenever they did, the galaxy would look to Earth, not as a backwater world, but as the place that made the stars pause, as the place where something different began,